Hey everyone, the weekend is over. That means, unfortunately, you have to listen to another episode of Bomb in the Am with Scoops and the Wolf. And as is the case on most Mondays, we are joined by a guest, this time none other than Jim Sterling, formerly of Destructoid, now of The Escapist and everywhere else that will have him.
Yeah, pretty much. That is that's my requirements for working. Can you stand me for more than 5 minutes? I'll take the job.
That's a good way, yeah. Just get into a room with someone or on a Skype call and just set for 5 minutes. If we can get past 5 minutes, we'll probably be okay.
How many instances have you had where someone was just like 3 minutes in and it was just like, nope, I'm done, I'm good, later?
There was one in the brief lull between Destructoid and the Escapist, where the Escapist was more or less on the cards, but I was looking at different options. There was one site which I won't name.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even get the 3 minutes. I knew someone there. I wanted to work with that person specifically, so I was like, well, I'd be interested in working there. And the phrase was, he's not even prepared to have a conversation. Which...
I'm having a conversation with you right now, so I'm gonna have to disagree with their premise.
Well, there's no accounting for text.
Fair enough. That's normally we start off talking about the games you're playing, but since you bring your recent kind of job search up, figuring out what you were doing next. One of the things that you were experimenting with, and I'm not sure if you're still doing it, but I'm curious what you found, because you started doing a lot of stuff on YouTube, sort of building up, a subscriber base there, seeing what the landscape is like there, and what we're seeing now are, a lot of people are building subscribers on YouTube, building their own base there, and that's just where they've started. Whereas, you are a little bit more like Alex and I, where it's kind of, come from a more traditional background and then seeing what it's like to build a base on YouTube, and I'm curious what you found.
Yeah, I mean, that came about from having the conversation last year that I think all the other games writers are going to have in about 3 years of, look at all these popular people, what the hell are we going to do? Mm-hmm. It's interesting having just turned 30 and feeling a little out of touch. So part of the, I just wanted to see what it was like, because it's a very different ecosystem, and I'm still experimenting with that. I do a YouTube thing like once a day just for the fun of it. It's a fun thing to do. It's easy. I can see why a lot of people like. When I say easy, it's easy to get into. It's still. Mm-hmm. I don't want to downplay the hard work that way harder working people on YouTube put in, but it's that easy entry level. It reminds me of the internet. The whole internet, several years ago before it got totally saturated.
Right.
You just dive in, have a go. If you've got a recording software, you've got a microphone, you've got a game, you can do something interesting. You can also do something terrible, which is 90% of Let's Plays, let's be honest. But then the really good guys just have that ease of access, or at least they did before Google started dividing the haves and the have-nots with the copyright stuff.
Right.
Which took some of the fun out of it. But yeah, I mean, it's been fun. It's been rewarding just watching that kind of thing grow on its own, because I've never had to do things on my own. I've worked with Destructoid, IGN, GamePro, just all these different places where there's already an audience and I just had to play to them. Whereas here it's like trying to build up an audience completely on your own, and it's been fun. It's been fun to do.
Before you, before you eventually decided to sign on with The Escapist, was there ever a temptation to just be like, I could just build this YouTube channel. I could just, start living off YouTube ads. I could just make this my thing, on my own from here on out.
I was interested. I'm very interested because I recently started talking with John Bain at Total Biscuit a lot, mm-hmm. and I do envy the sense of autonomous direction he has. He invited me on his podcast a few months ago, and he was just like, yeah, well, I can just have whatever I want. I can do whatever I like. And I'm like, I really envy that. But timing was timing, and my YouTube channel isn't really, it's grown pretty fast, but it's, there's no way I could live off it now or for the foreseeable future.
Sure. It takes a lot, when you look at, maybe what you would immediately consider to be a lot of views for a video does not equate to a lot of money at all.
No, yeah. It also depends where you go. I mean, I could get the same amount of views on a YouTube video that I get for, say, Jimquisition on The Escapist. I wouldn't earn anywhere near as much money for it, which did make me laugh, actually, when YouTube was taking all the monetization off of my most popular YouTube videos, which were hugely popular, you know, just like up to like maybe 50,000 views or something, and caused me to rant about it on the Jimquisition, where I earned a shitload of money, more than making up what YouTube had taken. So it is all about the venue you go to, and you know, what companies are backing you, and what ads you get, and who's watching, and who's ad blocking you, and just all these different factors. So yeah, I mean, Jimquisition is how I pay my bills, and yeah, I'm really, to be honest, I'm just looking for different ways to get out of the traditional games journalism racket, because I never felt like I fit in there the same way a lot of other people do, and I wasn't, to be honest, very good at it. I got a lot of criticisms when I used to post news on Destructoid of being sensationalist and trolling, and looking back, a lot of those criticisms were kind of true, because I am very from the heart, rant first, think later, which works fine for a video series like Jimquisition, whereas it's purely opinion. And when you're doing news, it just looks like you're being the Daily Mail or the Sun. And last year I decided I didn't want to be that, and I was never comfortable with the game journalism term itself. So really just trying to get out of that. I still do game reviews because I love games criticism, but when it comes to posting news, doing press releases and going to things like E3 and doing game previews and stuff, I just realized last year I can't do that anymore, which was one of the fundamental reasons why me and Destructoid parted ways. Was, you know, their business model is still very focused on that, which is valid, but I can't do it, not anymore.
I think that's kind of unfortunate, actually, just because I don't know. I feel like there's room in the overarching umbrella of games journalism for, you know, yes, the very straight-laced, you know, news style presentation, and for people who are, you know, much more opinionated, have a lot more, you know, personal stake in what they're writing about. And, you know, obviously, you know, you have your video forum and you have other places where you can express that, but you know, I find the idea that, you know, news can only be written from this dry sensibility of absolute factual information with no opinion whatsoever kind of depressing, to be honest.
Oh, don't get me wrong. You're totally right. I do think that dry news doesn't interest me. I like news with personality. The thing is, it's got to be done by someone who's good at it.
Right.
Someone who can still be professional, which is something I sometimes struggle with being.
Right.
So,
I think all of us
sure.
do.
Yeah.
You know, it's why I decided I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't feel I was good at that kind of thing. You know, it took me, about 6 years to realize I wasn't very good at that side of the business. But I'm happier where I am, just concentrating purely on opinions and that sort of thing, editorial, rather than any kind of news.
Glad.
So, Alex, what did you spend your time with this weekend? Did you get any time with any actual video games?
Threes. I started playing Threes.
Oh man, that game is something else, isn't it?
Can't stop fucking playing Threes, dude.
So Threes is a brand new puzzle game from two guys. I don't know the other guy. I know the other guy because he works in the cards office. Greg Woland. He was the designer on or a designer on Ridiculous Fishing as well. He's worked on a bunch of really successful iOS games, and yeah, Threes is his new puzzler, which you just played it. Do you want to explain kind of how it works?
Yeah, so you get a board, and everything on it's just like, you know, a number type puzzle game where you have to kind of move numbers into each other. You start out of a board that just has some threes, some twos, and some ones. Threes can go into other threes, which then turn into sixes, and then you can only match sixes with other sixes, and so on. Twos and ones eventually just become threes, and you just swipe up, down, left, right, whatever, back and forth to try and make those numbers fit into larger numbers, and you're trying to match them into the largest numbers you can before you run out of available moves on the board, basically. It is really simple. Most games take about 3 minutes before you fail miserably to even crack 1,000. And it is one of the more stupidly addicting things I've gotten my hands on in the last several months. I spent a lot of Saturday playing that stupid game. I had to charge my phone 3 times because I kept running it down.
What did you get? What would your score get up to?
The highest I got was 7,600 once.
Okay, that's about. So I've been kind of playing around with it, but mostly it's been my wife stealing my phone and my iPad till it finally came out, and then she could buy it for her own devices because I had been playing an early copy.
Yeah.
And she's about hovering in that area. I think she's gotten 10,000 once, but it's there. I'm going to try and actually get Greg to do it live. I'm going to buy like the hookup for an iPad, and then maybe stream something out of the cards office later this week, because watching Greg play his own game is this incredible, intimidating beast of a thing that makes you never want to play threes again, because his high score is something up in the 60,000s, which is like unfathomable when you play that game, that you could somehow score that high. So I'm thinking about I got to order that device, and I think I might have him on and walk me through some. Hey, you'll never want to play threes again once you watch this person play it.
Yeah, the highest score on my friends list I think is like Kyle Orland right now, which is like 8,800, which to me even still seems ridiculous because I cracked 7,000 once and I have not even come close since then. I think the highest score on the leaderboard right now is something like 99,000, which I have to imagine is someone doing some really insane shit there. But yeah, I don't care. I don't care if I'm good at it or not. I don't care if I can't stop playing it, and it's really unfortunate.
Well, it's a weird game in that. It's deceptively simple, which is why it's really fun and easy to get into. But a lot of what you're doing is, you're when you clear parts because you combine a card, that allows you to bring a new card onto the board. And I think they give you a preview of what's coming.
They do,
right?
They give you a preview of the color. Sometimes the white ones, which are the threes and any number above, they don't tell you what number's coming up. Like if you have a bunch of 12s on the board, another 12 might show up or another 3, but it's the ones and the 2s, what those are because they're color coded. So
right, and so basically the game, like especially when you get into situations where you don't have a whole lot going on, you kind of want to just try and shuffle in new cards. And if you don't really work with the deck that you have, you're going to get yourself in a situation where you kind of run out of spaces, and then the game is over. And the game really seems to play upon that sort of tension of getting frustrated with what you have and not sure what you should do with it, and then wanting to get more stuff on the board. But it only takes a swipe or two to go wrong, and then suddenly you can't do anything.
Yeah, and then it gets real wrong, and you're real bummed because you thought you were on a really good roll, and then all of a sudden it just comes crumbling down around you. It's sadness in a game, yet I can't stop playing it. God damn it.
Yeah, it's incredibly simple. And that it was. I had a bunch of friends over on Saturday night to play a bunch of instead of going to like the bars and stuff like that for my birthday, I had just a bunch of people over and we played local multiplayer games. And when people weren't playing, participating in one of the games that was happening on the TV, like basically threes was just getting passed around, like a group of 15 people,
right?
And selling versions of it to people who had iOS devices and bumming people out that had Windows or Android phones, because it is not available on either of those, and I don't believe it'll be around if it's there for a long, long time.
As if people who have Windows phones aren't bummed anyway, regardless.
Yeah, that's a good point. Point. Jim, did you play anything this weekend?
I have an Android phone. That entire conversation was boring as hell. I did recently trade that in. I traded in a Windows phone for it, so I am officially out of Bumsville.
You're moving your way up slowly towards iOS.
Android at least has games. There's something to the Android iOS. There's value there. Windows.
No, I love Android. Yeah. I don't know why I got rid of. I had a Galaxy, then I traded it in, and got a Windows phone for some reason. And I'm back on the Galaxy now. I had one of the Lumia 920. Gorgeous phone, beautiful phone, fucking useless. I may as well have just. You could use it. It was heavy enough. You could use it to beat a boy to death with. I could do that, but that gets old after a couple of times. So.
You can't have that piece on the back of the box either. It doesn't something about morals, ethics. I don't know. I'm not sure.
No, I'm a games reviewer. We don't know what those words mean.
That's a good point.
But yeah, I've been playing that Loadout, the free-to-play game.
How is that? All I know about that is that it's violent.
It's very violent.
Yeah.
It's you take damage throughout the game. How you get more and more scarred up as you get shot. Except here, like just whole chunks of armor flying away until somehow you're still pulling the trigger when your elbow is missing and it's just bone. No tendon pulling everything. It's just bones sticking out, and when you die, you could get cut in half, and you have to run the legs around for a little bit before you fall over, or burned to death quite graphically. Like, it's not just comedy fire. The body is blistering and blackening, but it's all got this cartoony aesthetic. It's very, very itchy and scratchy like.
Kind of like a Saturday Morning Soldier of Fortune, if you remember that game, and its horrifying dismembering tech that I thought was super cool when I was a teenager and that game came out.
Oh yeah, teenagers are going to love Lowdown. But it's got that kind of charm to it there where I don't think too many people... I know some people who have watched videos of it have commented that it's even with the cartoon visuals, it's still a bit too graphic. But I like it. It's come out at a time when obviously people are talking a lot about free-to-play business models, and this one just has a really good one, because it's like they give you gameplay first, and then build up audience goodwill, and then the audience wants to spend money, which is this incredibly innovative tactic in today's age, of giving someone a good product first and worrying about taking their fucking money later. So I can respect that, and it helps that it's just a solid game as well. Like, just very good arena shooter that costs nothing to get into, and even to be good at. Like, the basic weapons are all very good, possibly better than the more exotic stuff you can buy, which is all done with in-game currency. The premium stuff, you get some XP boosts with it, and aesthetic stuff, but otherwise brilliant. So that's had a lot of my time. I've also been playing for review Tweak Keyden, the Koei Monster Hunter-like thing on PS Vita, which I think is out on Tuesday, which it's pretty good. I can't say too much about it. I think there's some embargo. This is what I was saying about me being professional. I think I'm not allowed to say things about it, but...
Well, I guess here's a question. Are you a Monster Hunter guy? Like, how do you go into a game like this based on sort of like previous games of this type?
Funnily enough, I've tried to get into Monster Hunter and never really been able to. I recognize it's a really good game. Something about it's never clicked with me. Monster Hunter rip-offs, I seem to enjoy. I don't know what it is. Ragnarok, the PS Vita is swimming in them. There's Ragnarok Odyssey, there's Soul Sacrifice, and there's this. And I can't get enough of them. I don't know what it is about the original that just doesn't work, but just for me, it just doesn't seem to click.
I know for some folks it's like sort of like the animation priority, which is something that's in Dark Souls, something that's in Monster Hunter. Just kind of the idea that a lot of third-person combat action games we have been trained to expect that you are going to be able to do a lot very quickly, get out of situations in a way that's a little more dynamic. And Monster Hunter, sort of front and center, one of the things it teaches you, just like Dark Souls, is that look, when you choose to do an attack, hey, you're going to commit to this, and for better or worse, and often for worse, that's the attack you're going to use in that specific instance.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. My main problem with that system is usually the same rules don't apply to the guys you're fighting.
Sure.
You'll hit them and they won't cancel out of their attack, they'll cancel the hell out of yours, which I find very frustrating. To be fair, though, I mean, Soul Sacrifice, Ragnarok Odyssey, they all do that as well.
Okay.
So maybe it's just the last time I tried to play Monster Hunter was a while ago. I mean, maybe I could... I've had the Wii U one sat just over there for ages. I should open the box and try it, because I should give it another go.
I think the Wii U one was the first one that I sunk real hours into. I tried to give it a solid 8 to 10 hours, because everyone tells me that plays Monster Hunter that the first 5 hours or so are really just not that fun. It's a real hump to get over just the design philosophy, because it's just very contrary to a lot of what we see out of either just traditional combat action games or that are in third person, or just Western design philosophy that tends to favor the player having a little more agency in the middle of combat, whereas Monster Hunter, asks you to commit to things in some pretty profound ways, and also just lose a lot before you win. Whereas a lot of free-to-play design philosophy, a lot of just Western focus-tested design philosophy is all we want to make sure the player advances, or they choose to engage in higher difficulties that they have to sort of lose in order to win. So I gave that about 10 hours, and I got far enough to sort of really get what makes it appealing, and I sort of dilute Monster Hunter down into it's just a series of really, really tough boss battles. And if that sounds appealing to you, then I think Monster Hunter could have a lot of appeal for you. But also, what hurts it for me and why I ended up finding a game like Dark Souls more appealing, despite having pretty similar design DNA, is that Monster Hunter is fundamentally basically a multiplayer game that you only play single player if you're maybe farming for things and exploring new worlds, but like it is really meant to be a multiplayer experience that you're playing with friends or other folks. Whereas Dark Souls I really got into because I could do it by myself, and I just don't. I tend to shy away from multiplayer games because it's just not where I spend a lot of my time.
That's fair enough. I mean, plus I also think the last time I played Monster Hunter was in a pre-Demon Souls world. Yeah. So, and I fell in love with Demon Souls and later Dark Souls. So, I don't know. Maybe that's toughened me up a bit, grew me up some, and then I can maybe give Monster Hunter another go.
Trying to remember the last time I actually played a Monster Hunter game, and I think I still worked at GameSpot. So, and I think it was Ryan actually saying, "Can you play this for a minute just so I can make sure I'm not an asshole for hating this?" And I told him, "No, you're not an asshole for hating. I hate this too." So,
I mean, those games have been around for a while. It's easy to forget how long Monster Hunter has been alive and kicking. I mean, that was a PS2 game originally.
I remember the very first trailer still. I saw it. I thought, this looks awesome. Look at the size of that sword. Is it made of a skeleton? That sword's made of a skeleton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always loved the design of it. Yes, just the ridiculous size of everything. Like, except for the player. The player's armor, huge. The player's sword, huge. The dinosaur's massive. The player, little guy. Just like a little Ewok running around. I always loved the design of Monster Hunter.
Yeah, and I think actually, to some extent, the way sort of the rise of Western games and some of the struggle of Japanese game developers to adapt, especially once the Xbox 360 and PS3 came around, I think a lot of people just got a little more used to sort of Western design philosophy, that was very much about players immediately pressing start in a game and having fun. And I think that's part of the reason games like Dark Souls and Monster Hunter have found, very vocal, if smaller audiences, because there's just not that many games that say, hey, fuck you, learn how to play this game before you're good at it. And I don't know. There's just not a lot of those when you play most traditional big box AAA games.
Especially.
Not even in Japan now. Like, so many Japanese studios want to appeal to the West that they will try and do that themselves, and it might not be that studio's particular strength. So yeah, I mean, I got a ton of respect for the Souls games, and it's nice to have them. There's obviously room for both, and I'm glad that we have all sorts of different experiences, and they don't exist at the... I'm starting to sound like a fucking therapy group.
It's kind of what the show is, honestly.
And I think what's, it's funny that you bring up that those games, some Japanese developers, maybe thinking like, oh, we have to appeal to the West, whereas I think what makes, the Souls games so unique is that they are what From Software has been doing for a very, very long time. If you go back and play, the King's Fields games, and even the Armored Core series to an extent, like From Software has just been doing what it's been doing,
they appeal to themselves.
Yeah,
From Software appeals to From Software because fuck you, and I can totally respect that. I think it was Pete Hines at Bethesda I spoke to once when I was talking about, because they're a company that seemed to be one of the last big publishers that will put out original IP and take a gamble on stuff. And I was talking to them about stuff like Dishonored and The Evil Within and everything. And he said their main philosophy was, we just have developers make games the developers want to make. And I really think that's how you get quality and successful products, because no one's a unique snowflake. If you make something that appeals to you, it's going to appeal to other people. If you cynically try and focus test and appeal to just some nebulous demographic, I think that's when you start struggling to appeal to people, because nobody likes to try hard. So I think that's again at the root of the Souls games' success, is From Software are making the games From Software wants to make, and it turns out a lot of people want to see them make those games.
And I think that's awesome, because even though I am not much of a Souls fan, I remember back when I first got my Xbox, one of the first games I ever bought for that system was Otogi Myth of Demons, and that fucking game was badass, and no one bought it. No one bought that damn game.
Very pretty game, too.
extremely pretty game. One of the best looking original Xbox games. So if nothing else, I am just super glad to see them getting theirs all these years later.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like Dark Souls 2 is poised to be pretty darn big for them. I imagine that's gonna
be a hit
for them. Yeah. The other game that I played this weekend that actually weirdly ties into our guest is that I played a whole lot of Jazzpunk. And
I've heard that game's pretty decent.
Yeah.
You know what's amazing about it is a lot of the jokes are just so dumb, but they're so earnest and just to the point that I couldn't help but laugh at them. It's really weird in a way because I think
it's lowbrow with kind of a highbrow sensibility.
Yeah. I guess that's the way to put it. Where it's like if you actually were to just explain the joke that just occurred to someone, like what that's not very funny. But it's all about the framing and the general sense of the universe, and often that it's and the timing, and often that it's just very quick. Like even if it's a really dumb joke that there's not a whole lot to, it's over in about 10 seconds, and it's like, well, if you didn't like that one, don't worry, there's another one around the corner.
Well, it plays into that what we were just talking about developers making the games that appeal to the developers. If you ever talk to Lewis, the guy who made it, he's like that. Like he is Jazzpunk in human form. Just got this blunt sledgehammer wit to him, where he will just blurt out some weird, random thing that is clearly random. Sounds like it makes just enough sense that you don't want to just call it random. And he's, very unique individual, very strange individual, and I say that with the greatest of respect. But I think that's what led to Jazzpunk being the kind of game it is because there's an honesty to it. The guy's not just trying to make people laugh. He is naturally that person.
It really shows in just the style, like the thing I said in my review was that it's completely insane, and the jokes seem to come in from every which way, but it all feels like it's part of like a uniform vision. Like it is part of one person's particular artistic vision, and that in and of itself is kind of a rare thing. You don't get a lot of games that have that level of individual personality in them. For them to actually be really funny on top of that is fucking ludicrous. That never happens, and that is the kind of thing I want to foster way, way more of as we go along here, because I want more games like Jazzpunk, like that. I want more people who are that funny to be able to like bring that vision to life the way they want to on their own terms. Yeah,
it's. I think there's a philosophy that we're kind of talking about a little bit in some of these games, and even the idea of being on YouTube and things like that. I think there's kind of a through line there in the sense that what the through line would be is that watching such naked honesty and seeing like someone just create something that's essentially for themselves, but hoping or feeling like they have good taste or what they like others will like as well, and then watching something that pure coming out and other people getting behind it as well is a really cool thing. And I imagine that's really satisfying to create or be a part of as well, is something that just exists because, hey man, I want this to exist, and then I figure some other people will probably kind of come along the way as well. Which, that's if there's any way to summarize Giant Bomb, like it's a thing we do for ourselves that we're really happy that tons of other people think is cool too, because thank God that allows us to do it for a living.
That's the way to do it, yeah.
Jim, how did you end up doing some voice acting for this game? How did you end up getting involved?
Well, the road to becoming a critically acclaimed actor,
yes.
Which is technically what I am, because Chris Carter of Distractoid said I was good. So that's real now, no one can say otherwise. I knew Lewis way back, and Max Scoville, who is with Destructoid, is good friends with Lewis. So he'd been hanging around, he was reading Destructoid, he used to listen to the podcast I did there, Podtoid, a lot, which is now the Dismal Jesters since I left. And our podcast has a lot of that weird humor as well. So he found it funny, and therefore thought, well, if I'm making this kind of game that has these similar kind of skewed senses of humor, then he might be a fit for it. So we talked, and at one point I was going to be the director, like the guy who gives you the missions, but we just didn't have the time to get that done at the time, as far as I know. Either that or he thought I was shit. So I ended up doing some other stuff. So I played a couple of characters in the resort level, and yeah, I mean that was really it. Just sort of mutual respect for each other's work. Because I played Beetlenaut, the game he did beforehand on Android, and yeah, like just knowing the right people, which is how I've got some other future work coming up as well. Just knowing the right people and pulling the right strings, and getting drunk on and berating indie developers on Twitter and telling them to give you a job actually gets certain people. I don't recommend everyone does it, but it did get me another gig, so that can work sometimes.
Terrific. Now I know one of them that you play is the monocled fancy person Xavier Esperanto. Who's the other character that you end up playing?
The other character. Stop beeping. Anyway, the other character is it's a little harder to find, but she's not too far from Xavier. Is if you go round to the wet bar, there's a swimming pool around the back of the resort, there's a wet bar, there's a fruit hat on the bar, you click on that, and I'm the Carmen Miranda officially, but clearly Rita Repulsa.
Okay. So I was playing this game yesterday, and finding a deeply embedded Power Rangers reference in this video game. I had to put down the controller. It profoundly not only affected me because I was super into Power Rangers when that show was super popular, but just why would you put that in a video game? Like that's like it's such
not just that, but use it to deliver a Fruit Ninja reference at the same time. Just that layered sense of comedy that Lewis has.
Layers upon layers.
Like I had to pause it and go like that. That didn't happen. There's no way that was a Rita reference, because why would you do that? Like the amount of people that maybe there are more people than I would assume would pick up on that, but I had to like break down what just happened to my wife, and she's just shaking her head at me. She's like, I don't understand what you do for a living. Why this?
Well, it's a perfectly sensible story. Rita Repulsa threw a banana at me. What's to not get?
God, unbelievable. And so. How do you, you're someone that started out like doing, and is still doing media stuff, and so you're still out there, you're a critic, you're reviewing games, commenting on things, but you're also, dipping your toe in some ways into development in certain capacities, and, sort of, going over certain lines with developers in terms of working on them ahead of a game coming out. So how do you feel about that as you're sort of transitioning to that and doing kind of being in both worlds at the same time when most folks tend to sort of just do one or the other?
It's an interesting thing. There was a time when I was thinking maybe doing some narrative as well, which I may still do. But some people argue that if you're going to be a critic of games, you should make games before or during doing that, which I don't necessarily agree with. But at the same time, when I was examining my career up to this point, the life of a game critic or any kind of games media person is kind of parasitic, in that we kind of need this other industry to exist, and we very much just take from it. We certainly contribute to the culture of games, whatever it is. I blew all my wad on culture. But we contribute to the online community, or whatever you want to call it or not call it. But at the same time, we can't exist without that. And I was thinking it would be nice to contribute to the art side of it, and not just the critical side of it, which is just just be a bit more artistic and say that I've done this and help contribute to a medium that I obviously have a lot of respect and love for. I can't program for shit. I'm too lazy to learn to program, but I can talk a lot until people tell me to shut up. So if I can use that to try and contribute in some way artistically to video games, then that's what I'm going to do. So I decided that would be the avenue to pursue at the moment. My goal for the end of the year, as I said a few days ago, is to be the Troy Baker of jobs too small for Troy Baker to do.
Okay.
And so far that's working, because listen, Jazzpunk's come out. I am I recently got the role of a villain in Laura Kate's You Are the Reason, which is a game she's going to have a demo out for soon. And myself and Jonathan Holmes and Conrad, from two guys from Destructoid, are going to be in an RPG called Lisa, which got successfully kickstarted recently. And there's one other one that I still can't talk about.
Cool. I definitely sympathize with the existential crisis that I don't know if everyone goes through this in this job, but I've certainly have felt over the years is that feeling that you are just a parasite and commenting on other things, things that people spend years creating, whether you're talking positively about it or negatively about it, but just the idea that you can only exist because of what other people do. And I can, I've just kind of made my peace with that. The way I've always dealt with that problem is that, if I'm doing my job correctly, when I'm not doing, sort of like general reporting and things like that, if I'm, being a critic and writing essays about games and the time I've spent with them, I am privileged enough to spend all of my day thinking about, often not playing, but definitely thinking about playing video games. And what I can do is put into words or, in a video or whatever format it comes out, what people want. They don't necessarily have the time to properly express what they think or love about a video game. And if I can turn that into something that they can view or they can read and they better understand why they enjoyed or didn't enjoy an experience, I feel like that is totally meaningful to the discussion and adds to game culture that isn't just, I get to exist because other people make things, and if they didn't do that, then I wouldn't be around.
Yeah.
And I feel pretty okay with that.
I totally don't mean disrespect. So
no, I completely believe you.
I mean, obviously, I do this job. There's a reason I don't want to give up game criticism to do other things. I want to do other things and still do game criticism. I want to keep doing game criticism till the heart attack takes me, But at the same time, it's more of a personal kind of. I'm never satisfied with just what is happening at the moment,
Sure.
And I'm an insecure tosser like most writers.
Yeah.
And I think game criticism, any kind of art criticism, is in itself an art form. To craft a beautifully written criticism of something is magnificent to behold. If you've ever read some truly wonderful art criticism, it's beautiful in its own right. But just from my own standpoint, as someone who tries to do lots of different things, I just felt like I felt like I had to try and make some small contribution to that side of the fence, as well as the side that I obviously make my living off of.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, two topics before we bring the show to a close. The one is that if you guys been following all this Flappy Bird stuff, even if you haven't played the game, it's kind of hard to ignore at this point. But basically,
Flappy Bird is everywhere.
Yeah, for people that aren't caught up with what happened over the weekend, Flappy Bird is a terrifyingly simple video game in which there's a bird and you tap the screen for it to flap, and it's exceedingly difficult, and it has some pipes that look a little bit like something from Super Mario Brothers. But the game came out in March of last year, and then skyrocketed into popularity in December. Really culminated. There you go. And then
that's Flappy Bird.
And in recent weeks, has really taken off to the point where the guy is was making. I think he did an interview with The Verge, disclosed he was making basically $50,000 a day off the game. It's a free game. There is no in-app purchases. It is strictly has ads inside of it, which when we talk, I think it's one of the missed stories about that game, and especially contrasted to what is happening with like Dungeon Keeper and Tales of Fantasia and other games with really exploitative free-to-play business models, is that Flappy Bird, for whatever you think of it, was making a ton of money just by being popular and having some ads in it. No bullshit. You might hate the game, you might not like what it represents, but in terms of it making money in an honest way, it did that. And so the game became very popular, but then its creator was getting bombarded with requests for interviews, and just in general on Twitter he was getting just bombarded. And eventually he decided to take the game down. It is officially gone. It is not on the App Store anymore. It might be in a couple of countries just because the App Store hasn't updated. But as a result of announcing that he was taking it down, like the dude has been seeing just an unbelievable amount of abuse online. I'm not sure how much you guys have seen of it.
Yeah, I actually caught your tweets on the matter last night. I mean, I found the whole story fascinating, not just from the success story itself, but obviously all the other stuff. Because you had Jason Schreier at Kotaku was very angry at the game and talked about its stolen art,
Right.
which infringing art technically, if it is. Although
it didn't actually rip art out of other games to make that game.
It's not really theft, and to be honest, I'm not even sure if it's infringement because they are different models, blatantly unoriginal. Don't get me wrong, but it did look like he changed just enough to not have anything illegal or infringing going on. There was that, and then obviously criticism of him stealing another game which was released in like 2011 or something about a helicopter that did much the same thing. It's hard to always tell where any successful mobile game comes from because there's always going to be a dozen of them. So it was difficult. Like there were a lot of rumors about it. You know, that he wasn't really earning 50 grand a day. That bots were responsible for the success. That it was all a force contrived meme. And there were other people that saying it was honest. And you had other people implying that people were angry at the game through sheer jealousy. It was just the sheer emotional response that game has gotten from people when it is at its core a dumb game about a bird. Is interesting and fascinating. As far as him taking it down and stuff, I mean, I can hardly blame him. Like a lot of people say, well, you wouldn't just give up $50,000 a day. If he was earning $50,000 a day, he's probably got enough right now where he doesn't feel like he needs another 50 grand tomorrow. And I think I forget who it was who said it. I'm annoyed I forgot, but they said it's a good sort of counter argument against the idea that money can buy happiness because. You know, if you're going to be the most hated man in the game industry for a while, is it worth 50 grand a day? A lot of people might say, well, yes, it is, but then a lot of people haven't been attacked the way that guy's been attacked. I mean, I'm doing my dream job right now. There have been days where I've wanted to pack it in and come very close to quitting.
I mean, I feel like the reaction has way less to do with the game itself and more to do with this weird perceived offense over it being so popular. Like the idea that somehow a game that dumb and that, you know, theoretically plagiarized, though kind of not really, was the #1 game in the App Store for so long. And I think, you know, that when things like that become very popular, the people who are inclined to do things like send absurd death threats to developers fucking mobilize because they see that as some sort of weird threat to their own perception of what games should be good or should be popular or whatever. It's the same dumb shit that every other indie game creator gets when they make something that doesn't fall in line with, you know, what various corners of the internet think games are supposed to be. This just happens to be a really extreme and really weird example of that.
Yeah, the thing that, you know, really resonates with me about how all this has played out is it also people don't, you know, like Jim, like you mentioned, like people forget empathy in these situations. Like it's easy to look at like the thing that I tweeted, which is like a bunch of lists of death threats from folks for him taking the game down. Which also those people don't understand. Him taking the game down does not remove it from your phone. I think there's a fundamental.
You just saw me playing the bloody thing.
Yeah, there is a kill switch that Apple has, but as far as I know, they've never employed it. The kill switch is mostly meant for exploitative or manipulative apps that would, you know, essentially qualify as malware. But I don't think anything that's come down, either because Apple later says it shouldn't be there, like even emulators and things like that have snuck on the App Store. As far as I know, Apple has never employed the kill switch. So these people have the game on their phone. I think they don't quite understand it's not being removed from their phone. But furthermore, it frustrates me when people say that whole line about like, well, you're making $50K a day, I would put up with that. It's easy to look at a list of idle death threats that probably don't mean anything, but are not directed at you, and look at that and just say, well, I could deal with that. It is far, far different when all of that is directed at you. It feels very personal, it feels very focused, and it feels very directed in a way that you don't feel when you're just looking at a timeline pointed at someone else. And you think you could deal with that, but when you have hundreds or thousands of people, and for me, I think, for all of us, when we've said something that either pissed a lot of people off or maybe said something dumb that results in a lot of backlash, and you get those people, it only takes one. It really only takes one to get under your skin and potentially ruin your day. And if there are some people that can put up with that, that's great. But I don't think that's most people. And I think it's easy to forget what it must feel like when you have a mob banging down your door telling you, "We hope you die." And that disturbs me that we have lost any empathy for that situation, or at least it seems like a lot of people have.
Well, I did a video on this shortly after Phil Fish did his dramatic exit from the industry, where a lot of people say, "Oh, well, you should get a thicker skin if you're going to go out and put opinions or products out in the public space. You should have a thick skin." What people don't quite understand is that they've got thick skins. They got very thick skins, but thick is not impenetrable.
Sure.
Everything wears down. The toughest plate armor will get damaged through overuse. And when someone sends a death threat or some sort of abuse or insult to someone, to them, they've done it once. They don't realize they might be the 500th person that day to have done that to someone. And once you get worn down, there's raw skin underneath. And that's even positive stuff can do that if you get it enough times. Like in a lot of the stuff I do, my videos, podcasts, what have you, I show some affinity for the actor Willem Dafoe. Now, every time Willem Dafoe farts, I get several hundred links from people to it of, "Hey Jim, did you see this?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And even if I publicly several times say, "I've seen it. I've seen the poster for Nymphomaniac with Willem Dafoe going, ooh, on it. I've seen it." You still get it. To tell people, yeah, I know that the BBC quoted that Dungeon Keeper article I did. My granddad linked me to it, and I still get it. And it's positive stuff, and it's wonderful to see, but you still get it hundreds and hundreds of times. And even the good stuff can just ruin your perspective of things because
it's overwhelming. It's like how do you process all of that at once? And
it's water torture. It's the same principle of water torture. Enough things on one point hitting away over and over again will drive you mad.
Do you have any idea how many times people have sent me Nicolas Cage as Disney princesses? I've been sent that link hundreds of times over the last 6 months. I've seen it, just so everyone knows. I have seen Nicolas Cage as Disney princesses.
Yeah. I try not to get funny. I try not to get mad at people because I know to them it is the first time.
Yeah.
To them it's the first time, and I don't want to be the arsehole who, singles out a guy and criticizes them. I used to take criticism a lot more seriously. Well, I say criticism, I still take criticism seriously. Insults a lot more seriously than I do now, and respond a lot more to them. But I've had to try and really remember that to them this really is the first time it's been done.
Right.
They've not seen anyone else say the exact same thing. They've not seen anyone make the same joke. They've not seen anyone level the same accusation. They've not seen someone send you the same link to those xenomorph shoes. It's tough to do, but it's a shame, and I think it's a shame what happened to the Flappy Bird guy, even if you don't like the guy's game, because everything has someone who hates it. I said this once before. Everything is Twilight to somebody.
Yeah,
sure.
And for you to sneer at Flappy Bird because it's not your idea of what a game should be, even if you were to ignore the other accusations around it, if you just don't like the game and you find it offensive it's doing well, fuck you a little bit, because that is just a supremely arrogant attitude to have. And I would highly recommend people read the piece that the Indie Gamer chick wrote this weekend on her site, which was about that kind of thing, about people within the indie sphere ruining it, making indies look bad because there are these few vocal people that have this idea of what a game should be. Mm-hmm. And whether you're sneering at an indie game or sneering at Call of Duty, there's room for everything. And we shouldn't find it offensive that a game you didn't like is doing well.
To be fair, I guess there's maybe not necessarily, I don't know if we want to transition to a different topic here, but maybe there's not room for everything.
We'll let this be the final word, and then we'll transition.
Okay. Oh, I was just going to say, because, maybe there isn't necessarily room for everything, because as I recall, Jim, you wrote a review of a different mobile game recently that you said
Oh,
that
right,
maybe
yeah,
there
sure.
was
Yeah.
absolutely no place for whatsoever in this industry, and that would be the Dungeon Keeper.
I'm glad that was your last point, because as Patrick said last point, I was thinking there's one thing I've got to quickly backtrack on. Can I squeeze it in?
Yeah, go right ahead.
And that is it. I should add as a disclaimer, a singular piece of art one should not find offensive. A potentially reckless business model is something else entirely.
Sure.
If we're talking business structures, I also remember, because I've got a Jimquisition coming up this morning where I also make these puns. So I've got to make sure I'm consistent. That's something else. When we're talking about something like Dungeon Keeper and all the other games like it that are just damaging the market and just ruining the credibility of a business model I'm a big believer in. I believe very much in free-to-play done right. This free-to-wait thing, I think it's going to... It's an aggressive exploitation of a bubble before it bursts. And I think history has proven time and time again that is a terrible way of doing business. That is short-sighted, loathsome, greedy, the work of hacks. And it's probably going to benefit a few people at the top who take the money and run, but it's going to destroy everyone else. And I find it very sad when you get developers at Mythic say backing that up. I'm like, you're kind of trying to justify and validate something that's going to ruin your career in the long run. I find that very sad.
Yeah, I wrote a thing, like a column, I think, early last year, where I had the gall to kind of stand up for the notion that free-to-play by itself inherently is not an evil thing, that it is something that can be done in a way that is to benefit of both the developers and the players, that it is something that can be, utilized for good. I've increasingly felt guilty for writing that as, the year kind of wore on as we got into this year, because there have been way, way more examples of people doing just blatantly disgusting things with it versus actually doing worthwhile things. It's actually good that you mentioned that Loadout is a game that does that well, because I actually want to play that now. Because there are so few examples of games that actually do the free-to-play thing well without exploiting it brutally, especially in like the last 6 to 9 months. Like I think Forza was like one of the first big games I ever played that felt like it was completely, kneecapped by that experience. So when I read this, review of Dungeon Keeper that you did, which is probably, as someone who's reviewed a lot of bad games in his day, I will say that is one of the most savage reviews I've probably ever read of a video game, and I mean that as a compliment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Just seeing how deep down that rabbit hole that game goes was just galling.
Yeah.
I never expected that anyone would actually be that blatant and that brutal about it, but they were. And I mean, you were obviously a fan of Dungeon Keeper in the franchise before. I mean, what did you feel when you first got your hands on that and were like, holy shit, what is this?
Oh, I mean, it helped that I was primed. Rich Stanton had tweeted an image of it. A lot of other people were talking about it. Boogie was talking about it. Francis was talking about it, and we were making fun of it back and forth. And I was kind of prepared for the most part, but it really isn't until you get your hands on it that you see just how it really dawns on you. Because you can tell someone, oh, I click on a block and it takes a day to mine. And that sounds disgusting. Until you experience it, until you click on it and you think, you put the phone down and look at it and think, I'm playing it now. This is the experience.
This is the game.
Here. I think, and again, this is kind of spoiling the Jimquisition video I've got coming up in about half an hour. To me, there is no excuse. It's by far the most. It's now my least favorite business tactic gameplay model, because the sheer lack of imagination you need to reach for the lowest of hanging fruit. Like, it's not a game, and I hate that criticism of most things. People say that about Gone Home, they say it about The Walking Dead, they say that's not a game. Most things are. This isn't a fucking game. This is taking the bare idea of a game, because there's no interaction. Clicking on blocks isn't a game. Just giving you the concept of a game and holding even that thin slice of an idea to ransom. If that's the scale of your imagination, to think, here's a game, now fuck you, you're not having it, and now give me money. And then when you give them money, all you're doing is unlocking the opportunity to give them more money later to do the same non-interaction. That's so unbelievably just unimaginative, unscrupulous. Just what a hack you have to be to do that, to not even make a game, to just fabricate a cash delivery system where you sit there and say, give me money, and fuck Square Enix for doing it with all the bravest as well. I can't say that enough times. I'll take every opportunity I can take.
And I think, you know, what I think really frustrates me the most about all this is that, a little to Alex's point about, you know, free-to-play in, you know, its purest form as an ideal, like, is a really amazing idea, because the idea that more people would get to experience games, more people would get to experience, you know, the medium that I really love, formatted into a business model that, you know, gives people greater access to those experiences is a really tremendous idea. Like, I love the idea that more people don't have barriers to entry to experience games, and in some ways, maybe they aren't, you know, quote-unquote gamers or play games, but because something's free, maybe they'll engage with it on a level that they wouldn't because they don't consider themselves that type of person. And the way it's being perversely distorted as essentially psychology exploitation, and that's the part that that's the part that really weirds me out, is essentially how a lot of free-to-play business models that are exploitative are exploiting people's psychological
I call it
tendencies.
psychological warfare, right? That's what I label it, because it's adversarial, is what it is. It's a fight between you and the game.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why I don't like microtransactions in $60 games, in actual paid retail stuff, because a lot of people say, well, you can just ignore them. You can't. That's not how microtransactions work.
Right.
It's a psychological pummeling against you. That's what Dead Space 3 did. And I still like Dead Space 3 as a game, but it was damaged by microtransactions, because it puts in that you've got to wait around thing. It dangles the carrot and won't ever give you the carrot until you give them more money. And you can't ignore that. Even if you think you've ignored it, well done you. That game just beat you.
Right. Have you heard from EA recently?
I've got quite a few fans at EA.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You got to imagine EA's a big...
Sorry.
Oh, go on.
I was just saying, I've got to imagine there's a few bitten tongues in the EA offices
Sure.
that I help relieve a little sometimes.
Yeah, you can't, like, EA is the kind of company, like, it's not, whatever EA puts out and whatever Dungeon Keeper represents, it is a small, you know, it may represent what, you know, the high end of EA wants, the executives want of their business models, but there are good people that work EA, and I'm sure the fight that we're talking about right now has happened countless times in meeting rooms. They just lost, because the profit models show there are better ways to go, quote-unquote better ways to go in terms of squeezing cash out of people.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people there that are, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, when we talk about the things that we get out of these jobs, that's one of those things that I get really pumped up about, is the idea that you're giving a voice to people that can't go out there and speak about it. Like, there are not EA employees want to keep their jobs. They can't go out and just start talk about how much they hate this business model. They have to just sort of maybe point to, look at all these people upset, and that requires, you know, folks like ourselves mobilizing and being, you know, a platform for that anger. And I think that's really important.
Well, it always warms my heart when I get a developer, sometimes publicly, more often privately, after, say, a Jimquisition episode's gone live, just thanking me for saying something they wish they could say or have tried to say before. First of all, it lets me think I might know what I'm talking about, which is always nice, because I sometimes wonder. But yeah, it's nice to feel you can do that. And yeah, I've always said I love games as an art form. I love games as an entertainment medium. I hate them as a business. I love the art, I hate the business. And the same with companies. I love the people, I hate the executives. I hate the part of them that wears the suit and the tie. The people within the suit and the tie, they're fine. And I'm not suggesting we, you know, go around to Activision and undress Bobby Kotick. But maybe if we did, he'd enjoy it, we'd enjoy it, everyone would get along.
Yeah,
I'm not having a good time with that mental image, to be honest with you.
I'm having too good a time with that mental image.
Yeah. Well, as we begin to wind down the show, if folks have a couple questions they want to direct to me in the Giant Bomb chat, we'll pick one or two of those out as we begin to wind down the show. We're kind of running out of time, but I at least want to touch on something that I mentioned on Twitter, and Jim, you had in a recent video, which, I think a lot of people oversimplified the argument, and you could certainly say that maybe I did that as well, although I wasn't really talking about your argument in my tweets, although people certainly connected them, was this idea that Steam needs more quality control. I was wondering if you could maybe lay out the quick version of what you were arguing for.
I was hoping to run out the clock on that. I didn't get away with it. Yeah, I did a video last week that said Steam needs quality control. It goes back a lot to what we were saying about the free-to-play stuff, about how the free-to-play model has been wrecked and given a terrible reputation by the amount of shit that's exploiting it. And the mobile market itself, a lot of knockoff awful games have come out and ruined the credibility of the mobile platform, something else I used to be a big believer in. And I fear that could happen with Steam. Thanks in part to early access. All things that are noble and good in theory, but because there's absolutely no quality control, no oversight, I fear that Steam could ruin its own credibility. When you see games like Castle Miner Z sneak off from Xbox Live Indie games where it belongs and end up on Steam, I worry, because I remember when getting a game on Steam was a mark of a game's quality, a mark of a game's prestige, and now it doesn't feel that way. When a game like Guys of the Wolf, when a game like Recoil can come out so broken as to be unplayable, I find it shocking that a game is being sold in that state. And while I totally get other arguments, I understand the free market, I understand that I'm a woolly liberal doing a video for a lot of young libertarians. I understand how philosophically we've got problems there. But at the same time, I would like to see something, a bit more of a guarantee. Because right now I can buy something on, say, GOG.com and feel like the game's going to at least work. I don't feel like I have that assurance on Steam anymore, and I find that potentially troubling.
So my feelings on that are that if you think of the two options that I think actually face Steam going forward, I mean, they've kind of dipped their toe into it with Greenlight, is that I think Steam's inevitable end game, whether it happens this year or next year, I think it will happen sooner rather than later, is that Steam will go the App Store model. They will tear down all the walls and people can submit anything. And then the onus becomes on Valve to have either good discoverability or have curators that their front page is what you're talking about. The quality control doesn't occur in terms of what is brought into the Steam ecosystem, but it's what you're presented with as your options. Because if we go back to the old system that Steam used to operate under, it was essentially, I think my understanding was 2 or 3 people that decided what went on Steam at all, which is overwhelming and crazy for how big Steam has gotten. That's just not sustainable over the long haul.
Sure.
And I am more uncomfortable with 2 or 3 people deciding what is good or what games are, even if they are from Valve, a studio that I have a lot of respect for, than the problems that come with tearing down all of the walls and just allowing everyone in. Because I think I trust the 2 or 3 Valve people more than I trust the users of Greenlight that go on a power trip. But if we're going down the path of more accessibility and lower barriers to entry to the marketplace itself, I'd rather just tear all of them down and say, let anyone in, and then spend a lot of time making sure that front page is exactly what you should be looking for on Steam. If you don't want to do the research, if you just want to go to the front page and be told, hey, here's what's good, here's what's on sale, I think the onus is on Valve to make that the better front page, because interface is not necessarily their best characteristic, and I think if they were to improve on that, I think we would both be happy, because I think there's a world where you get what you want and I get what I want.
Absolutely, yeah. I think a lot of people felt like I was arguing for some draconian, overbearing dictatorship. I don't believe in the old days of Steam. In the old days of Steam, they still let fucking shit go on.
Right.
But you're right. I think the answer lies somewhere in between, of having a market with some sort of quality control. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we block games from coming. It can mean curation. It can mean giving visibility to things that deserve it and burying the stuff that doesn't. It's definitely there's a compromise to be had, and that's all I want to see. I want to see Steam retain its reputation as a place for a quality gaming experience. And I want the developers to benefit from that, the developers that get on there and that get featured on Steam and get to say, we were featured on Steam, this is a big step for us. Because they deserve that. The maker of Jazzpunk doesn't deserve to get equal billing with Guys of the fucking Wolf. So yeah, and really, I mean, Steam does do quality control, and has, in fact, on the very day my video went up, had to employ it when Crescent Moon Games' Paper Monsters went up without their approval, and it was obviously this game that another publisher that had an old version of the game shadily put up there. And Steam had to step in and take it down, and it probably would have been better if Steam had been able to do that beforehand, just to ensure that games A, work, and B, are owned by the people putting them up there. It would be nice to just have some sort of minimal standard, some sort of guarantee that if I'm seeing a game on Steam's featured list, I can buy it and get at least those two guarantees.
Well, and I think one thing that would go a long ways towards solving this for the future is if there was some way, like Steam does offer refunds, but you kind of need to bend their arm in order to get it. And I think if Valve is going to open the gates in this way, especially with early access, I think early access makes this a particular sticking point, especially for me, because you're selling games that are broken in a lot of ways on purpose. That is part of early access. And the fact that there isn't any sort of standardized refund system as a part of Steam, I think if there was one, it would make this problem a lot easier to swallow for a lot of the negative consequences. If there was a way, if a developer was being disingenuous, for the player to engage with a refund or at least requesting one from Valve in a formal capacity that was more than just complaining enough and then Valve kind of doing it on the side but not wanting to promote it because they don't want everyone to do it, I think that would go a long way to making a lot of people feel more comfortable. Because if you can pay money and then know, you know what, if they straight up lied to me because they took advantage of being able to release a game early or something of that nature, but know that you can get your money back, that makes you probably a lot more comfortable with spending that money because there's a lot less of a downside to it if you can get that money back, reasonably so.
Yeah, I mean, you can be even a bit more open with refunds than that. At least for a few games I've bought on Android, I get a limited window where I can get a refund, no questions asked. Like, it might be 10 minutes, an hour, or something, but you can tell with a lot of those games, the second you open it up, that it's a piece of shit. But I get the refund option instantly the moment I buy it. And if Steam had something like that, like say half an hour to an hour after you buy something, so you can just try it, and if it looks like total garbage, then just no questions asked, get the money back. Just not forever, but just this limited amount of time. I think that might make people a lot more happy, and I'd be a lot more willing to take a gamble on stuff.
Yeah, doesn't Origin have something like that?
Say again?
Doesn't Origin have something like that? Because I know, obviously EA's had a couple of games that maybe people want to return recently.
I know they've got a refund policy.
They do, yeah. They do have a refund policy of some sort. I'm not sure. This also represents how little any of us use Origin, that we're only vaguely aware they may have a policy that is actually more consumer-friendly than what's on Steam. The irony of that. But yeah, I think you might be onto something, Jim. There is that the way to standardize that is maybe not putting the onus on the player to explain the reason they want the refund, but if you time limit it in a way that you can jump in, tell pretty quickly if this is totally broken, and then get out. But if you pass,
I might be old-fashioned in thinking that the customer shouldn't have to explain the customer's self. I remember when I was a young man, the customer was always right, but it seems to have become the customer has no rights, which shouldn't be. I think the customer should be able to, at least for a limited time so they don't take the piss, is to be just, I bought this game, I did not like it, I want my money back. That's valid. Most stores have always... people were trying to defend Steam by saying, well, brick-and-mortar stores don't have an onus to do things. Brick-and-mortar stores will also let you get a refund, no questions asked. If we're going to draw that comparison. The good ones will, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not always the good ones, but the ones with good refund policies too.
Yes, there we go. All right. Now we straighten that out.
Well, it sounds like actually we answered most people's questions in the discussions we just had. So I think we will start to bring this show to a close. Jim, it's been awesome having you on. We really appreciate you.
Thank you very much,
sir.
sir.
We would definitely love to have you on again sometime soon. And for folks that maybe aren't familiar with you, somehow, if that is possible, how can they follow you after this show finishes?
Yeah, you can. Well, I mean, you can always follow me on Twitter @JimSterling. My YouTube channel is also Jim Sterling, all one word. I make it really easy for you.
That's handy.
Yeah, you can also see my reviews and my show, The Jimquisition, one of which, The Jimquisition, is going up in about 18, 17 minutes at The Escapist Magazine. That's escapistmagazine.com.
Cool. Alex, what are you up to this week?
I'm going to finally get that Super Mario 2 video out of the way. I might just write a review of Ollie Ollie because I keep playing it and I really like it, and I want more people to play that game. So I might do that as well. And tonight I will be on Aubrey Sitterson's Straight Shoot podcast after Monday Night Raw talking about some wrestling. So there's, I think, like a Google Hangouts page if you want to go, RSVP for that or something tonight. Otherwise, there will be an archive tomorrow. So that is what I got coming up right now. What about you?
Later today, I'll be doing my Spelunky stream in about 45 minutes. I saw Chris Remo score today, and there is no way I'm going to win. So today is just a wash.
Cool.
He got like 700,000, which is just. Let's see. 1 p.m. my time, so 11 a.m. Pacific, and then 2 p.m. Eastern. I will be a guest on Jeff Kanata's DLC show that he recently just started. He was a guest on Bombin in the AM during a week that you were gone some time back, around the time when we started doing guests. So I'm returning the favor, and I'll be on his show. Unfortunately, I don't really know how you watch it. I just look at my Twitter or Jeff's Twitter, and you'll find a link to it later today. And at some point, hopefully today, after I do that, I'm going to write something about the Flappy Bird stuff. Given the TED Talk that I gave last year, I have a lot of thoughts on the lack of empathy that people have for folks that are sort of the targets of online abuse, and this seems like a good time to kind of weigh in on that. So I'm hoping to write something about that before the end of the day, and then I don't know what's going on the rest of the week. I haven't thought that far ahead. So
fair enough.
That will be a show for us. Jim,
Indeed.
Thanks again. Appreciate you coming
Thank
on.
You, sir.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. And we will see you guys again on Friday. And we'll have a guest again next Monday. I just don't know who yet. So I'll figure that out at some point this week. All right, Friday. I will see you then, Alex.
Oh.